When embarking on an outing, Ethan arrived with a mother and her daughter. 3 vehicles were available, yet there was a shortage of one seat. Ethan removed me from the front passenger seat to accommodate the mother and daughter. The journey from this location to Haicheng requires 5 hours, during which I suddenly experienced feelings of fatigue. I exited the vehicle calmly and observed them departing in a large group. I also witnessed Ethan, upon reaching the destination, engaging in lively activities with the mother and daughter by the seaside. In a video, an individual inquired why Ethan had not yet come to find me. Ethan, while patiently instructing the woman in swimming, casually remarked, "Elena is easily pacified and will not become upset." Unbeknownst to him, I had resolved never to harbor anger toward him again. When Ethan arrived with the mother and daughter, I had already considered abstaining from the trip. A beautiful woman dressed in a cheongsam, holding the little girl's hand, approached us with a smile, saying, "Elena, Ethan mentioned that you invited us to join for an outing, thank you." The woman's smile conveyed gentleness, yet it subtly carried an undertone of provocation. She was fully aware that I could not have extended an invitation to her. Ethan placed the woman's luggage into the trunk and opened the rear door, only to pause momentarily. 2 additional males, the younger brothers of his friend, had unexpectedly joined and occupied the back seats. Observing the situation, the friend awkwardly touched the tip of his nose and said, "Brother Ethan, I was unaware you intended to bring others." Noticing Ethan's silence, he stepped forward to remove the 2 individuals from the back seat. Before Ethan could respond, Lena interjected in opposition, stating, "They are at an age where they enjoy play, do not make them leave." Lena slowly lowered her head, her voice audibly tinged with regret, discernible to all present. "Daisy and I will not be joining, I wish you an enjoyable time," I stated. After taking a few steps, she turned back and added, "Ethan, Daisy was talking all night about going out to play, please send her a few photos while you're there." Ethan's eyes shifted slightly as he opened the front passenger door. He reached out and pulled me out, saying, "Elena, step out for now, I will return to pick you up." At that moment, I was uncertain of the expression on my face. It prompted the 2 boys in the back seat to exit the vehicle as well, saying, "Sister, take our seats, we won't be going." Their faces briefly displayed subtle sympathy, tinged with a hint of guilt. Gazing at Ethan's unusually calm eyes, I let out a self-deprecating laugh, concluding that this trip was evidently not feasible. I calmly retrieved my luggage and guided the boys back into the vehicle. Before the car departed, Lena, holding her daughter, sat in the front passenger seat and waved goodbye to me with a triumphant expression. Through the window, I observed Ethan's striking profile, and a sudden sense of aversion arose within me. My gaze settled on the ring adorning Ethan's finger, which I had placed there during our engagement. Presently, it appeared somewhat obtrusive. Over the 5-hour drive, Lena posted nearly 10 updates on Instagram, initially featuring roadside scenery, followed predominantly by images of Ethan's captivating demeanor while driving single-handedly. A comment beneath the video inquired, "Lena, is this your boyfriend? He's so handsome." Lena responded with a shy emoji and continued posting updates of Ethan throughout the journey. The trip from here to Haicheng spans 5 hours, and during a rest stop, Ethan telephoned me. He instructed me to remain stationary and await his return to retrieve me. Waiting for such an extended period under the sweltering sun was beyond my current capacity, yet I offered no objection and even agreed. My acquiescence stemmed from a desire to ascertain whether Ethan would fulfill his promise to return for me. I sat on the sofa, observing the clock's pendulum tick by 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours. This continued until Lena posted another Instagram update, depicting the woman in light attire, reclining on a swim ring, accompanied by a tall man nearby. The video captured cheerful laughter and a loud exclamation. "Brother Ethan, aren't you going to pick up Elena?" Someone asked, causing the man's hand to hesitate briefly, tilting the woman's body and resulting in her inadvertently swallowing seawater. After a brief silence, Ethan's demeanor normalized as he replied, "A slight delay is inconsequential, Elena is compliant and will not be upset." Before the video concluded, I exited it, certain that he would not return for me. Subsequently, I rose slowly from the sofa and gradually removed the engagement ring from my finger. Over this period, it became evident that my perceptions were not illusory. Ethan had indeed changed from his former self. I could no longer delude myself into anticipating our wedding day. I had organized this outing, booked the hotel, and meticulously prepared the itinerary, yet I alone did not participate. A sense of unwillingness emerged, resentful that Lena could unabashedly benefit from my efforts. I contacted the hotel manager to finalize these arrangements, after which I discarded the ring into the sewer, allowing the water to wash away our past, much like Ethan himself. I suppressed the faint bitterness and reluctance within me, repeatedly assuring myself that these emotions would eventually dissipate. After a prolonged period, my inner turmoil finally subsided. Ethan and his group spent the afternoon at the beach before returning to the hotel, only to be informed by the front desk that the presidential suite assigned to Lena had been cancelled. It was the room reserved for me, and since I did not attend, its cancellation was justified. Ethan attempted to secure another room for Lena, but was told no vacancies remained. They were all aware that this hotel belonged to the Yen family, and thus deduced that I was responsible for the arrangement. Lena began to sob, appearing frail and pitiable, saying, "Is Elena upset? It's my fault. If I weren't so slow to learn, you wouldn't have had to spend so much time teaching me. Ethan, Daisy, and I should leave." Ethan's breathing grew slightly labored, not due to the woman's impending departure, but because he abruptly recalled that he had forgotten to retrieve me. As darkness fell, he pondered where a woman with a child could go in an unfamiliar city. Softening, Ethan refused to let them depart, grasping the woman's wrist firmly and stating, "Nonsense, this has nothing to do with you. If Elena is angry, it is with me. You take my room, I'll return tonight." Ethan instructed his friend to look after Lena and her daughter and prepared to leave without retrieving his luggage, his steps noticeably hastier than usual. Lena called out to him, saying, "I'll go back with you. If Elena is upset, I can help explain." After consideration, Ethan agreed. Given Elena's disposition, she likely would not leave until he returned, and if she became upset, it might require considerable effort to appease her. Communication between women is often more effective, thus he decided to bring Lena along. However, her child was too young to endure the 5-hour drive, and their belongings could not be left behind. An additional hour elapsed while packing, and Ethan, who typically lacked patience, waiting in the car for Lena for an hour was indicative of an unusual concession. The woman in the car, concerned that the man had not eaten all day and might be famished, occasionally placed a biscuit in his mouth, allowing him to eat while driving. These observations were derived from Lena's 15th Instagram post, which I viewed recently. I forwarded the video to Ethan, proposing a termination of our relationship, stating, "You need not return, let us end our engagement." After ensuring Lena and her daughter were safely home, Ethan arrived at our designated meeting point, only to find me absent. Under the dim streetlights, a few scattered cars stood in profound silence. At that instant, an abrupt wave of panic engulfed him. He struggled to articulate this sensation, akin to the imminent loss of something vital, a feeling that peaked upon reading my message. Proposing a breakup with Ethan did not yield the anticipated relief or satisfaction. I was perplexed by my own reaction. Despite my firm resolve to end this relationship, I found myself on the verge of tears, particularly as this bond concluded due to Lena's involvement. My phone rang with a call from Ethan, and I stared blankly as the screen darkened and lit up again. I pondered when it began when Ethan, who once vowed to protect me for a lifetime, chose to align himself with Lena. I was retrieved by the Yen family at the age of 10, yet upon my return, another girl my age already resided in the household. That day, I wore a faded shirt and cracked shoes. I locked eyes with the girl standing upstairs, dressed in a princess gown and clutching a doll, a stark contrast that humbled me to the dust. At that moment, I contemplated that, had I not been lost, all she possessed should rightfully have been mine. I later discovered that the girl I envied and resented was merely the daughter of our family's housekeeper. For an extended period, I was ostracized by the Yen family. They disapproved of the habits I had acquired externally, frequently comparing me to Lena, whom they had raised. Only Ethan consistently supported me from the outset. Now, the sole individual who chose me was also departing. After an indeterminate duration, my phone remained illuminated, and I pressed the answer key. Ethan's typically nonchalant tone now carried a subtle tremor as he said, "Elena, I'm downstairs at your place, can we talk?" Ethan leaned against the car door, fixated on my window without moving. I donned a coat and descended to meet him, harboring numerous questions, all of which dissolved into tears upon seeing him. Ethan swiftly enveloped me in an embrace, repeatedly assuring me there would be no recurrence, only for me to push him away. I acknowledged that I was somewhat uncomposed in that moment, exclaiming, "Ethan, don't you realize that Lena is the person I detest most? She competes with me for everything, aren't you aware of this?" A fleeting glimmer of remorse flashed in Ethan's eyes as he responded, "I recognize that I erred today, Elena, I apologize. I will no longer see Lena in the future." My vision blurred as I wept more intensely, declaring, "I no longer desire these tumultuous assurances. Leave, tomorrow I will discuss canceling the engagement with my parents. Alternatively, if you wish to replace me, address it with them yourself," I stated, avoiding Ethan's reaction and uncertain why I had hastened downstairs to confront him. In that instant of dissent, I yearned to ask why he had abruptly forsaken me, yet I received no answer, only an apology. At that juncture, I comprehended that emotions are profoundly fragile. Early the following morning, Lena arrived with her daughter to apologize. Since her divorce, her visits to my home had increased in frequency, and a room was perpetually reserved for her, regardless of her presence, the best-lit room in the villa. During the years she was absent, the room was cleaned daily and remained off-limits to others. Upon seeing me descend the stairs, Lena promptly rose from the sofa, knocking the pudding from her daughter's hand. In my mother's presence, she emitted a pitiable tone, saying, "Elena, Ethan sent me to apologize. I genuinely believed you had invited me, which is why I brought Daisy along. It's entirely my fault, could you please refrain from being upset with Ethan? He was exhausted yesterday and had to drive back at night, which poses a considerable risk," she pleaded. Observing Lena's clumsy performance, I retorted, "You thought I invited you? Then why was I, the supposed inviter, the only one excluded?" A peculiar smile emerged on Lena's demure and refined face, after which she harshly pinched her daughter in my presence. As her daughter cried, my bewildered mother scooped her up with a look of tender concern. She began to reprimand me, saying, "Lena has already moved out, how long will you persist in this commotion? Even if there were something between Lena and Ethan, it would be due to your own incompetence in retaining your man." A pang of bitterness stung my nose as I responded dully, "Since none of you hold me in high regard, let's cancel the engagement then." "If it's to be cancelled, so be it. Who are you threatening here?" My university-attending younger brother Ryan burst through the door, accompanied by a silent Ethan, and shoved me aside to shield Lena. He declared, "Elena, don't assume you can act recklessly just because Mom and Dad feel guilty toward you. In my heart, Lena is my only sister. If you dare trouble her again, don't blame me for being discourteous. No one in this family holds any affection for me, a fact I have long recognized, but to have this disdain so blatantly exposed was unprecedented." I gazed at this brother for an extended period, noting our striking resemblance, a pair who should have been the closest of siblings, now estranged like adversaries. Without further comment, I turned and departed. Pausing beside Ethan, I offered a bitter smile and asked, "Ethan, are you satisfied with Lena's apology to me?" A pang gripped Ethan's heart, rendering him speechless. Several days later, they summoned me back, having left home to discuss the engagement's dissolution, with Ethan and his parents present. I assumed the matter would be swiftly resolved, yet it proved less straightforward than anticipated. Everyone opposed the cancellation, even Ryan, who despised me most. Noticing my puzzled scrutiny, he rolled his eyes impatiently and snorted, "Don't think it's because of you. Canceling the engagement would bring disgrace upon the Yin family." Ethan's mother clasped my hand, her smile failing to reach her eyes, and said, "This is Ethan's fault. He saw a woman struggling with a child and momentarily acted out of misguided compassion. It's not a significant issue, hardly warranting such an uproar." My mother signaled me from the side, her expression suggesting, "That's enough, further fuss will be irreparable." All assumed I was vying with Lena, seeking Ethan's placation, with none believing my genuine desire to terminate this relationship. After a moment's silence, I took a deep breath and exclaimed, "Enough, can't you see Elena is nearly in tears?" Ethan strode to my side, took my hand, and led me outside. In that moment, I was momentarily deluded into believing he remained my sole ally. I pressed my faintly aching chest, suppressing a fleeting surge of emotion. Ethan embraced me once more, though the warmth of his hold had diminished from days past. "Elena, grant me another chance, I cannot be without you," he pleaded earnestly, yet my response remained as calm as still water. The wedding proceeded as scheduled, set for year's end, under the assumption that my long-standing bond with Ethan would not be easily relinquished. My current coolness toward him was perceived merely as lingering resentment. Unbeknownst to all, I was covertly preparing to teach in a mountainous region, intent on departing alone. Perhaps Ethan still loved me presently, and his abandonment that day was a momentary lapse, yet I refused to stake my marriage on the uncertainty of his enduring affection. Before my departure, I celebrated my final birthday with the Gu family. This time, my mother personally cooked, spending the day in the kitchen. My father returned early from the company, and Ryan, a university student, took early leave from school, clutching a birthday gift box. This birthday was the grandest since my return to the Gu family. Ethan entered with a 3-tiered cake and presented a necklace from his hand, its design striking. I had never known Ethan possessed such discerning taste. Gazing at the table laden with delectable dishes, a faint reluctance stirred within me. To share one last family meal before my departure was, in itself, a small comfort. Suddenly, I noticed 2 additional sets of bowls and chopsticks on the table, and my heart sank as a wave of desolation surged forth. My eyes involuntarily drifted to the closed door, where the doorbell chimed repeatedly, and, as anticipated, Lena and her daughter entered. I abruptly laughed, mocking my own naivety and the lingering expectations I held for this family. My father descended the stairs, arms outstretched to lift Lena's daughter with evident delight. Ryan sprang from the sofa, handing the gift box to the little girl, exclaiming, "Uncle wishes Daisy a happy birthday." Laughter and joy filled the air, the atmosphere vibrant. My mother beckoned the family to dine, seemingly oblivious that another individual shared this birthday. I stood aside, my eyes growing warm with unshed tears. Unnoticed, Ethan approached me, gently prying open my clenched fists, his eyes reflecting increased concern for my well-being. He guided me to sit, filling my bowl with food, and raised his voice slightly to wish me, "Elena, happy birthday." The room fell silent instantly, punctuated by the sound of chopsticks dropping. Lena added, "Elena, happy birthday. I didn't realize you and Daisy share the same day. Yesterday, I ran into Ethan at the mall, and I helped pick out the necklace he bought for you." Lena flashed a smile, pulling an identical necklace from her neck and dangling it before me ostentatiously, asking, "What do you think? Beautiful, isn't it?" At that moment, I sensed the man's body tense briefly. He whispered an explanation. I didn't expect to encounter her. Silently, I removed the necklace from my neck, clutching it in my palm, and said, "I'm hungry, let's eat first." During this meal, only Lena and her daughter ate with relish, while the rest struggled to swallow. An additional sum appeared in my bank account, transferred by my father, who retreated to his study post-dinner. My mother ascended the stairs and returned with a Hermès bag, her favorite, used only once, which she handed to me. My brother, claiming he needed to return to school yet lingering, approached me unsteadily and, for the first time, softened his stance, asking, "What do you like? Tell me quickly, I need to get back to school." I replied, "No need, I don't like anything." He huffed, "Fine, if you don't want anything, it saves me money," and stormed off with a cold expression. Ethan, having retrieved the necklace from the trash, apologized again, saying, "I'm sorry, I didn't realize you'd mind. I'll buy you a new gift." Moments later, his eyes began to brighten. "Elena, let's travel. You've wanted to see the sea, haven't you? Just the 2 of us this time, okay?" he proposed. I responded with a neutral expression, "Fine, you make the arrangements." After I dismissed Ethan, I was left alone in the living room. I noticed the housekeeper preparing to discard the barely touched birthday cake and called out to stop her, cutting a cream-heavy slice and inserting a candle. I made a birthday wish: may Elena find peace and joy for the remainder of her life. At 2 a.m., I descended with my suitcase and encountered the housekeeper fetching water in the kitchen. She regarded me with surprise, and I offered her a smile, saying, "I'm going out with Ethan." Without further elaboration, I left this home that had never afforded me a sense of belonging. I selected a mountain village where I had resided for 10 years as my destination for volunteer teaching. The Yen family had never inquired about my life prior to that decade, disdaining my ostensibly ignoble past and seeking no association with it. Even Ethan consistently diverted the conversation whenever I broached the subject, and I understood that he, too, harbored disdain for my having lived a decade in a realm nearly alien to theirs. During breakfast, my prolonged absence prompted a displeased expression from my mother. The Yen family mandated presence at the dining table before 7 a.m., a long-standing tradition. After waiting several minutes, my mother could no longer restrain herself from sending someone to fetch me. The housekeeper emerged from the kitchen upon hearing this and hastily clarified, "Madam, the young lady departed last night with Mr. Ethan by plane for an overseas trip." My mother's expression remained unsoftened, her eyes betraying a hint of scorn as she remarked, "I thought she was serious this time, but it's just another petty rivalry with Lena. Indeed, not raised by us from childhood, she resorts to such crude tactics. Enough, Elena is our biological daughter, after all, treat her better." My father lowered his newspaper, casting a cold glance at her. Ethan secured international flight tickets and spent a day traveling elsewhere to purchase an expensive diamond necklace for me, intending it as a surprise. Thus, when he attempted to contact me, he discovered my phone had long been powered off. He rushed to the Yen residence to find me, only to learn I had supposedly left with him, igniting profound fear within him. He queried all my friends, who uniformly reported not having seen me for a considerable time. The Yen family parents eventually realized I might have vanished. A month later, with the wedding date nearing and the bride still missing, the Gu family contemplated dissolving the engagement, a move Ethan thwarted. During this period, Ethan's relentless search for me left him visibly haggard. He confronted his parents, his bloodshot eyes fixed on them, declaring, "I will not cancel the engagement, I will find her." My departure caused my mother to feel humiliated, leading to her falling ill in a fit of anger. To cheer her, Lena relocated with her daughter to the Yen residence, and under her attentive care, my mother's health swiftly improved, though her resentment toward me deepened. "Henceforth, I'll consider her no daughter of mine, she needn't dream of returning to this family." "Isn't she so headstrong?" "Then this wedding is off tomorrow, I'll go to the Gu family to cancel it," my mother declared. Lena, soothing my mother, interceded on my behalf, saying, "Please don't be upset, Elena will surely return before the wedding. Perhaps she was jealous over Daisy's birthday that day. It's my fault I shouldn't have brought Daisy, then Elena wouldn't have left home. Haven't we compensated her? What more does she want?" Mention of me never elicited a favorable expression from my mother. Observing this, the housekeeper quickly brought a glass of warm water to her side, advising, "Madam, your health isn't fully restored, please calm down. Miss Lena, discuss other matters with Madam, she's upset, don't keep bringing up Miss Elena." Lena covertly rolled her eyes at the housekeeper but refrained from mentioning me further. 3 days remained until the wedding, yet I was nowhere to be found. The Gu and Yen families convened and resolved to abandon the nuptials. Ethan, still searching for me externally, was unaware, becoming the last to learn upon his return. The Gu family parents were inherently displeased with me as a daughter-in-law. Were it not for the Yen family and Ethan's fondness for me, they would never have consented to his marrying me. Now, having caused such a scene, whether genuine or feigned, they deemed me lacking in propriety, unfit to be a Gu family daughter-in-law. Unable to sway his parents, Ethan sought out my parents at the Yen residence. Lena opened the door for him, and her daughter Daisy immediately extended her arms for Ethan to hold her. Presently devoid of such inclination, Ethan patted her head, signaling her to play independently. The living room was in disarray, cluttered with discarded items. Amid the mess, Ethan spotted curtains I had personally selected, mingled with the trash. Upon closer inspection, confirming they were from my room, he bellowed at the housekeeper, who permitted you to touch Elena's belongings?" His shout startled the little girl into tears, a scene witnessed by Ryan, who had just returned home. "Ethan, what's gotten into you?" he demanded, tenderly lifting Lena's daughter, wiping her tears, and comforting her patiently. The housekeeper, aggrieved, spoke with a trace of complaint. "Miss Lena handed them to me and told me to discard them. I wouldn't dare decide that on my own." Ethan turned a dour gaze toward Lena, his eyes brimming with anger. Lena maintained a faint smile, unfazed, explaining, "Daisy, being playful, drew on them and soiled them. I intended to replace them with new ones for Elena." Ethan stared intently at the woman before him, having witnessed Elena suffer numerous slights at her hands. With Elena absent, she had promptly moved in and tampered with Elena's possessions, claiming it was unintentional, a notion he refused to accept. Perhaps due to Ethan's prolonged stare, Lena's face gradually flushed. Ryan, observing their proximity, felt an inexplicable surge of irritation. Releasing the little girl, Ryan positioned himself between them, obstructing Ethan's view of Lena, and snapped, "What are you doing at my house? If there's nothing, leave. I told Lena to throw them out a mere curtain, hardly something the Yen family lacks." Hearing the commotion, my mother descended from upstairs, inquiring about Ethan's purpose. Ethan fabricated an excuse to visit Elena's room to retrieve something. Upon opening the door, he could scarcely believe his eyes. The room was empty, transformed into a children's dance studio. Elena's bed, clothes, and every trace of her presence had vanished. At that moment, Ethan finally grasped the depth of her sorrow when he had left her alone that day, taking Lena and her daughter instead. In that instant, Ethan felt indignation and grievance on Elena's behalf, aching for her. Departing the Yen residence, he who had always been courteous caused the elders to lose face for the first time, retorting, "If Madame dislikes Elena so, why did she bear her in the first place?" Reprimanded by Ethan, Madame's face turned livid with rage. Though Ryan was also angered, he knew Ethan well. Ordinarily, even in anger, he would not display it as he did today, a trait ingrained in his very nature. Thus, he followed Ethan's lead and ascended the stairs. He had rarely entered Elena's room, typically only calling her from the doorway. Upon realizing why Ethan was so incensed, Ryan found himself sharing the same sentiment, feeling aggrieved for Elena. Though he did not acknowledge her as his sister, the indelible bond of blood tied them, and he would not tolerate outsiders mistreating her. Supported by Lena, Ryan's mother also entered Elena's room and was momentarily stunned. Lena's daughter began dancing upon entry, her movements polished and graceful, clearly the result of extensive practice. The little girl approached Ryan's mother and Ryan as if seeking praise, asking, "Grandma, Uncle, did Daisy dance well?" Ryan's mother offered no reply, turning to Lena beside her with an even tone, "Where are the items from this room?" Seeing no reproach from Ryan's mother, Lena smiled more brightly, saying, "I had them move the items to the basement. The bed and cabinets obstructed Daisy's dancing, and I feared she might fall." Ryan's mother countered, "I permitted dancing in Elena's room, but not the relocation of her belongings." Unperturbed by Ryan's mother's abrupt critique, Lena responded, "But in such a confined space, how could she dance without moving things? Ryan, don't you agree?" Uncharacteristically, Ryan did not align with his favored sister this time, his silence causing Lena's eyes to redden instantly. Grasping her daughter's hand, Lena's face was awash with tears within seconds, sobbing, "I'm sorry for the trouble, I'll take Daisy and leave now." Before Ryan's mother could speak, Ryan interjected, "Fine, it's best you return." He turned and summoned the housekeeper to restore Elena's room to its original state, decreeing, "Henceforth, no one is permitted in this room." In an unseen corner, Lena glared at her so-called brother's back with venomous resentment, a scene fully observed by Ryan's mother beside her. I arrived at this place steeped in memories, encountering numerous familiar faces. I did not disclose my identity, yet swiftly integrated with the villagers, who treated me kindly and grew even more delighted upon learning I hailed from a major city. Upon my arrival, several volunteer teachers were already present. I donated the funds my father had transferred to me, enabling the renovation of the school with additional classrooms and the construction of a basketball court for the children. Life here brought me a profound sense of calm. A week after my departure, I sent Ethan a message proposing a breakup and thereafter ceased checking messages from anyone. Here, the children's smiling faces and the villagers' genuine warmth continually influenced me, instilling a desire to establish roots in this place. 3 years elapsed swiftly, yet I found myself compelled to leave, departing with another individual. Indeed, here I discovered a lifelong companion, who had arrived 2 years prior to me. Originally, he could have left when I arrived, yet he remained for an additional 3 years, disregarding his parents' repeated urgings. Left with no alternative, his parents visited to discern what detained their son so long. Upon meeting me, the elderly couple offered some instructions and departed cheerfully. A colleague's teasing left us both blushing, as this return was for our marriage. Initially, I had no intention of returning to the Yen family or seeing that person again, but upon activating my phone, I found it inundated with messages. The latest, from Ethan's mother, stated that Ethan's health had severely deteriorated, imploring me to visit him once. I stood dazed for a prolonged period until the man beside me inquired what was wrong, snapping me back to reality. For the typically proud Ethan's mother to humble herself, Ethan's condition must indeed be grave. I resolved to make the trip back. Upon landing, I immediately contacted Ethan's mother, who escorted me to the hospital to see him. After my departure, he had never ceased searching for me, and the prolonged exertion had compromised his physical health. He began experiencing insomnia and resorted to medication, the dosage escalating until it now proved largely ineffective. Upon seeing me, a spark of vitality ignited in Ethan's clouded eyes. Reclining on the hospital bed, he shed tears possibly of remorse and struggled to rise, causing the four in his arm to swell immediately. Ethan's mother hurriedly summoned a nurse to reinsert the needle. Ethan gazed at me unblinkingly, and I understood his unspoken question: would I leave again? Under his mother's beseeching look, I shook my head, saying, "Whatever you wish to say, wait until you've regained your strength." Ethan nodded compliantly, visibly elated. Exiting the hospital, I encountered Ryan, who, by my reckoning, should have graduated university. 3 years had matured him considerably. Upon seeing me, he no longer displayed his former overt emotions, increasingly resembling Ethan in his restraint. "You left without a word for 3 years, Elena. You're quite something," he remarked, then softened his tone slightly, adding, "Come home with me, Mom and Dad miss you dearly." Intending to visit home regardless, I joined him in the car. Ryan deliberately sought conversation topics, but our mutual unfamiliarity was palpable. He knew little of me, nor I of him, and within minutes, silence prevailed. Fortunately, the journey was brief, sparing us prolonged stifling awkwardness. Upon alighting, we encountered Lena with her daughter at the entrance. Unclear why they hadn't entered, Lena's eyes betrayed unmasked resentment upon seeing me exit Ryan's car. Ignoring them, Ryan opened the door, ushering me inside first, nudging me and explaining, "She's no longer connected to our family." The door slammed shut, barring Lena and her daughter outside. Perhaps distance lent clarity. In my absence, they had discerned Lena's true nature. Bereft of blood ties and compounded by aversion, she now ranked below a stranger to them. My parents stood in the living room to greet me, this time refraining from any reproach. Their eyes held newfound concern and hesitation. The meal was prepared and still warm, suggesting they knew of my return the moment I disembarked. My mother, for the first time, served me food, appearing shy and slightly awkward when I looked up at her. "We heard you visited Ethan. That boy has suffered greatly for you these 3 years, my father said, lowering his chopsticks and presuming to plan for me. "Since you're back, let's expedite your wedding." I replied, "No need, I've found someone I care for." The family was stunned, aware of the deep bond between Ethan and me, deeming it unlikely I'd forsake it so readily. "I returned this time to marry. His family is in the north, and I'll leave in a few days," I explained. Ryan reacted vehemently, shouting angrily, "Do you realize how frantically brother Ethan searched for you these years? How could you abandon him for someone else?" Perplexed why ending things with Ethan precluded me from moving on, I chose not to argue and rose to ascend the stairs. Ethan hastened his recovery in the shortest time possible to see me, only to learn of my impending marriage. His smile froze, and a profound sadness enveloped him, as though he might shatter at any moment. I reiterated to them, "I've found someone I care for, I'm getting married." Ethan stumbled a couple of steps but steadied himself forcibly, retreating silently, his frail silhouette disappearing into the bleak autumn, leaves clinging to him. When my boyfriend arrived to fetch me, he crossed paths with Ethan. The north had grown cold, and he brought me a thick scarf and gloves, along with newly purchased warm clothing. The wedding was scheduled for next month, and I planned to visit there beforehand for some time. My entire family came to the airport to see me off, Ethan included. He remained silent throughout, smiling a smile that lacked appeal. Before departing, I bid him farewell. On the wedding day, Ethan did not attend, nor did I inquire. My husband's parents were kind, treating me better than their own daughter. I was now surrounded by those who loved me and whom I loved. Over the years, my relationship with my family remained lukewarm, occasional concern devoid of closeness. Since my marriage, I have heard no further news of Ethan, nor has any word of him reached me for the remainder of my life.